In this video, we're going to be talking about shell commands. This will just be a short introduction for anybody who doesn't know what shell commands are. There are multiple shells, and depending on what operating system you're using, how you access your shell will be slightly different. For example, on Mac, you open your shell by launching an application called Terminal. On Windows, it's called PowerShell. On Linux, it's called the name of the distribution, so you might open Ubuntu shell. But none of that really matters, that's just different names for opening the application. It all does the same thing. What the name is doesn't really matter to you. So I'm working on a Mac, so here you're seeing my terminal. So for example, if I search here, you can see I have an application called Terminal. And if I open it, this is what you see. It acts the same way as any other application on your computer. So for example, other common applications are things like Facebook, Google Chrome, Zoom, all these sorts of things. And all those applications serve a specific purpose. And the purpose for the shell application is to give direct commands to your computer. The way you interact with the shell, so the input the application expects from the user, are things called commands, which are basically just a series of characters. For example, pwd is a command, ls is a command. They tend to be abbreviations or just shortenings of words. They tend to make sense. For example, ls is list, cp is copy. Things like this where there's just a common sense approach to it. A lot of them just looking at them, you could guess what they do. For example, I can ask my computer to tell me which folder I'm in. I can do that with this command here. And it tells me I'm inside the users folder, inside the Wayne Parker folder, inside Sandbox, inside DevOps. So I'm inside the DevOps folder. You don't need to worry about remembering this command. I will cover this in a future video, but this just gives you an example of what it is you can do using your shell. The reason we use the shell, and we do use it a lot in DevOps, is because it's a very quick and efficient way to interact with your computer. As you learn some more advanced commands, you can perform some pretty complicated tasks with just one line of text. For example, a common scenario might be you want to search through a file and replace every instance of the word John with James. Traditionally, you would do this, maybe, I don't know, you would open up Microsoft Word, whatever your text editor is, and you would scroll through, and it would be like data entry. You would go through, and you would find every instance of John and replace it with James. However, using your shell, you can literally do that in one line. It takes a couple of words, a couple of commands, and you can do that entire file, even if that file is, say, 10,000 lines long. And you can imagine how long that would take to do for a human being sat there doing it manually. You save enormous amounts of time. So it's really worth investing the time in learning shell commands. But that's it for this video. This is literally just a quick introduction to what shell commands are, a quick glimpse at a terminal or shell, and just for a bit of context for anybody who has never used a shell before and isn't aware of what it is a shell actually does. The way you interact with the shell, so the input the application expects from the user, are things called commands, which are basically just a series of characters. For example, pwd is a command, ls is a command. They tend to be abbreviations or just shortenings of words, they tend to make sense. For example, ls is list, cp is copy. Things like this where there's just a common sense approach to it. A lot of them just looking at them, you could guess what they do.